gentlemen of the media, welcome to the media conference given by the Prime Minister, the Honourable Mia Mottley. Joining the Prime Minister this afternoon are the Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs on the Prime Minister's right, Honourable Gail Marshall. On the Prime Minister's left is the Minister of Home Affairs, the Honourable Edwin Hickson, and on his left, Minister of Information, Broadcasting and Public Affairs, Senator the Honourable Lucille Moore. We also have on the Attorney General's right hand the Director of Finance and Economic Affairs, Mr. Ian Carrington. The Prime Minister has just returned from Washington, D.C., where she and the team met with officials of the International Monetary Fund, and she will be reporting this afternoon to you on her visit to Washington. Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Good afternoon to all Barbadians. I thank you for the opportunity of being able to have a very brief press briefing with respect to what we've had to do this week. As members of the public are aware, I left here on Wednesday afternoon in order to be able to see Madame Lagarde at the International Monetary Fund, the Managing Director, and with me was the Governor of the Central Bank, the Ambassador Clyde Maskell, and the Director of Finance and Economic Affairs, Mr. Ian Carrington. We were clear that we needed to go and meet, having discussed 2 weeks ago with her the need for Barbados to request the IMF to come in and discuss with us liquidity support because of our poor international reserves position. Since then, as you know, we delivered a budget to the people of Barbados through the Parliament, and we have been able to move on with our discussions to see how far and how quickly we can go. At the very outset, we made it clear to the social partnership and to the country on Monday when I spoke that what is at stake is our ability to preserve the Barbadian quality of life and to preserve our value of our dollar. We have inherited a situation where our net international reserves are precarious and where indeed our debt is unsustainable. Barbados spends just over $4 billion a year as a government. $1.8 billion of that is in debt, both in amortization and interest. In other words, in principal and in interest. It is untenable, and we therefore took decisions as well to suspend our debt payments. It is clear to me that there's been a lot of commentary and a lot of talk, and I've come really this afternoon to say to Barbadians that everything is on schedule and on plan with what we expect. And I want Barbadians to relax. We got this one. We got it. The bottom line is that when we met with Madame Lagarde, we were able to discuss with her and her team the framework that we've put on the table. We made it very clear that we had mission-critical issues that we had to deal with, that we inherited a government with infrastructure that was largely broken, buses that Barbadians couldn't get, garbage trucks that are not functioning, a sewage system that is affecting the South Coast. And you will note that in almost every statement, either from the mission chief or even the tweet from Madame Lagarde herself, there's a recognition that there are things that the Barbados government must do because we have strongly fought for it and argued that this must be the basis upon which we move forward if we are to keep our country together. Similarly, that there are groups of persons who have been without any kind of 8 years, public servants did not have a pay increase. You cannot ask people to go on a long journey if you're not prepared to give them breakfast. It is as simple as that. And we are happy that our engagement with Madame Lagarde recognizes that our situation is urgent, that they are prepared to support, as she said in her tweet a day ago, Barbados' economic recovery and transformation plan, that as a result, they will be sending a team to Barbados on the 2nd of July to start discussions with us between the 2nd and the 12th of July. And anyone who knows anything about these processes will tell you that they are amazed at how quickly things are moving and how fast we are moving forward, because we recognize that uncertainty cannot serve the interests of anyone in this country. There are many of you who have said to me, slow down, you need to get some rest, you've just come out of an election. I appreciate your well wishes, I appreciate your prayers. But I need you to know that it is in our interest to be able to get to the point where we can put the framework for what is our program behind us, such that all Barbadians can play their part. Because as I've said all along, we're in this together. We have inherited a situation that is almost a poison chalice. It is not fair, and I want to make sure that even as we treat to the issue of debt restructuring, that no future generation of Barbadian or this current generation should ever have to go back to this place again because of a government's utter display of fiscal recklessness with the manner in which they manage the affairs of the country, as did the last government. And as a result, it means that we're going to have to put systems in place. I walk around. The arrears are now closer to 1.9 billion because every day new figures are being discovered. The Director of Finance will tell you that even as we were in Washington, we discovered that there was a lease payment due for the Sanitation Services Authority building, which is still unoccupied, which is not yet open, but the government would have had to find $3.8 million on Friday to pay for that lease in circumstances where, in our briefings with the SSA, this is the kind of disconnect. And I feel for the Attorney General because he is being bombarded by literally every line ministry to be able to review agreements that have been discovered literally day by day. But the purpose for this press briefing is to say, look, we have this matter under control. I know that there are some who are a little nervous about the manner in which the comments are coming from persons with respect to debt. The bottom line is there is no easy way to say that you are suspending debt payments. There is no easy way to make an omelette without breaking eggs. And we have to go through the process. We make the point over and over that a lawyer who hires himself as a client is a fool. And the government of Barbados has hired some of the best advisories with respect to debt restructuring in the form of White Oak. The leader of the opposition sought to make that an issue this week. Mercifully, the first decision that the Cabinet took was to place them under the Financial Administration and Management Act under proper footing in terms of their engagement. And secondly, they have a track record of having worked not just in the Caribbean in terms of Grenada and St. Kitts, where successful programs were entered and completed, but also in the Seychelles and Iceland and Pakistan, so that at the level of strict debt advisory, we've hired, in our view, one of the best boutique firms in the world. Similarly, at the legal level, we've hired one of the top law firms, if not the top law firm, in sovereign debt restructuring out of New York. The name is Cleary Gottlieb, and our particular partner who's dealing with us has worked on Argentina, has worked on Iceland, has worked on almost every major debt restructuring in the world, and indeed, I believe that some of the creditors would have wanted him to work for them. So we have this. Relax. We got this. There are those who may be politically motivated, who may want to tell you other things. Let us stay focused and give everything a chance to work out. As I said, we're happy that Madame Lagarde has responded on each occasion with dispatch. When I spoke to her, and it seems difficult to believe that all of this is only 2 weeks. When I spoke to her 2 Thursdays ago, within 72 hours, a team was dispatched to Barbados. When we met this week, when she said that she was available to meet, we went up and we had an excellent meeting where we were able to articulate clearer why we need to be able to have a baseline that takes into account fixing our broken infrastructure and protecting the most vulnerable in our society, and why we will continue to do the things that we have to do in order to be able to make the structural adjustment that is critical to make Barbados' government more fiscally responsible and to be able to see growth come back to our economy in a way that it has not over the course of the last decade. And they were comfortable, so much so that they have moved with alacrity now, as I said, to send down this team by the 2nd of July. The government itself is preparing itself for its negotiating team, and we are bringing back in people who we have here as well as others who we need to make sure that our negotiation team is a strong team and to ensure that that which Barbadians will have to commit to in exchange for accessing support, and it's really a loan that you access from the IMF at very, very, very negligible interest rates, 1%, and that will allow us to boost our international reserves. But the importance of going to the IMF is also that it unlocks other international concessional funding. So the Inter-American Development Bank, for example, will now be in a position to start lending us serious amounts of capital once we have an agreement with the International Monetary Fund. Indeed, upon signing with the IMF, there's an immediate unlock of significant amounts of capital, and then we go into other discussions with them on policy-based loans and investment sector loans, and similarly with the Caribbean Development Bank and others. So that while we may not be able to go immediately to the international capital markets, let us remember, we haven't been there for the last 5 years. We haven't been there for the last 5 years because successive credit downgrades have precluded us from being able to go there. By taking the actions that we're taking now, we're going to turn the corner to be able to go back there. Countries like Seychelles, who went through the same thing as we did, within a short period of time are back there, and quite correctly are choosing, people want them to borrow, but they're choosing that they don't want to. And that's the point that I want Barbadians to understand, that while we are doing all of this, it is not to go on a spending spree again. It is for us to be able to make sure that we do that which is necessary to bring back growth to this country and to allow Barbadians to have a quality of life that we know we deserve and that we always anticipated that we would have were it not for the last decade. So, relax, we got it. There are other things that will come to bear. I believe over the course of the last week there was a lot of commentary by other persons about the size of the government. The last decade saw the largest single exodus of public servants through early retirement since independence. More senior public servants left before their retirement age than at any other time in this country's history. The Director of Finance, the PS Finance, PS Investment, Chief Immigration Officer, Chief Education Officer, the Head of the Foreign Service, PS Healthcare, PS Environment. I could go on and on and on. What we have therefore inherited is a government where people have had to be promoted in some instances 2 and 3 levels above where they were because of that mass exodus. Now, we may speculate as to what causes exodus. I have my own views, but that's not for today's press briefing. The bottom line is that the country therefore finds itself with a vacuum in terms of experience at the top level across every ministry almost as a result of the mass exodus. In addition to that, let us be real. I know what it is to be Attorney General and Minister of Home Affairs. We had 26 departments under us. You cannot manage 17, 15, 20, 26 departments when each one is in crisis. If they're not in crisis, as happened in the past, you can do it. But when they're in crisis, somebody has to come to work every day to make it happen. But I will only say to those who have now found it possible to have a voice at George Street all of a sudden, and who are looking to use our circumstances as a platform for their individual leadership prospects, I will only say simply that at least what we are doing is known to the Barbadian public, is above board, and is being paid by the Consolidated Fund in a manner that relates to all of the other things that we have before it as salaries for ministers. People know what they are. I can't speak to the off-book gratuities that we are now discovering by the day, that they perhaps may want to speak to and answer to the country about in the very near future. But what I can say is that it is our duty to remain focused, because Barbadians must be able to go about their work, must be able to make decisions about their future, their jobs, their investments, their children, in a way that is seamless, and the only way that can happen is if we protect our quality of life and if we protect the value of our dollar. Most countries, as I said, take 9 to 12 months to go through this kind of IMF negotiations. I trust and pray that we will not take that long, and that is why we are grateful for the manner in which Madame Lagarde and the IMF team has responded with alacrity on each occasion that we've engaged with them. We too, however, must be ready to do so. And for those who say that there is a sloth, I have to tell you that when I asked the state-owned enterprises, I got, when we came into government, a position dated September 30th as to what their balances were. On the following day, I asked that we receive the May 31st balances by the 5th of June, and that those that don't come on the 5th of June, please ask the ministers, the chief executive officer, and the chief finance officers to meet us at 3 o'clock on the 6th of June. On the morning of the 6th of June, there were 3 entities that had not submitted. By the afternoon, there were 2. And of the 2, one was as a result of persons being unfortunately ill. People respond when there is discipline and there is leadership. And this government has a responsibility to the people who voted for it to make sure that we demand that there is discipline in the management of the affairs of this country. And we want you to know that everything that you're seeing unfolding is just part and parcel of the process. I remember, similarly, in terms of the engagement of expertise, when we went to arbitration, there were those who were concerned, why have we taken Trinidad to arbitration, what's going to happen? There was some anxiety. We hired the best counsel that we could hire. We went to arbitration. Within 2 years, we were in and out, and we got a decision that for 29, 30 years we could not get, and we got 99% of what we wanted. We have this under control, both in terms of our debt restructuring as well as in terms of the structural adjustment and the fiscal adjustment program. It is ours, and it is ours because we are the ones who've chosen to put in trust loans and to increase pensioners to non-contributory pensioners and to do the 5% pay increase to persons who have not had a pay increase since 2010. This is not a program written anywhere else but Barbados, because in fact it is written in the manifesto of the Barbados Labour Party, because it delivers on the mission critical points, it deals with the broken infrastructure that we advert to in the mission critical areas, but then it takes the point that the burden has to be shared fairly, and that those who believe that it is only labour to adjust, we say no, capital has to help adjust too, hence the debt restructuring. Those who feel that it is only Bajans who have to pay taxes, we say no, 3 times our population visits us when the year comes, and they help us, yes, greatly, but they also contribute to the use of the infrastructure, and we therefore ask them to carry a little something as we move forward together. For those who continue to say that we've excluded the cruise sector, a clear understanding of what took place in the social partnership knows that the only reason we haven't dealt with the cruise sector yet is because the government of Barbados signed that most unfortunate agreement with Global Ports a week before, days before the election, that would give away the concession to manage our cruise tourism for $34 million US for 30 years, and $1 out of every $6 coming back to the port, plus the 34 million, and 1/5 of any increase at all in the next 30 years. So 4/5 of any future increase in prices goes to global ports, and 5 out of $6 goes to global ports, and all we get back in return is $34 million. Now that is a travesty, and we have determined that in the next 2 weeks or so, we are going to have a meeting with the ports and bring everybody to the table, because equally they sought to assign a 30-year agreement, AG, in circumstances where the port only has until 2030 from the Ministry of Housing and Lands, and therefore have no control over that property in the year 2031. So these are the kinds of things. Similarly, we've said with the OECD. We are waiting for the private sector to bring its report at the end of July. I know Minister Toppin is working on it assiduously. When those two things come in, we will deal with it. Similarly with the betting and gaming sector. So we are going to make sure that everybody shares in the burden. But at this point in time, I want Barbadians to be assured we got it and to relax. And that in the circumstances, we will continue to keep you abreast. I'm satisfied that the meetings went in Washington much better than we could ever have contemplated in terms of the timelines. But the work now lies ahead of us to do. And we will keep the public informed every stage of the way because, as we said, this is how we are going to govern. Okay? Are there any questions? Let me say that while I was in Washington too, I had the good honor of being able to meet with Barbadians in the diaspora. And there are more. I mean, they had very short notice, but a lot of them came out yesterday evening at the embassy. And they are all willing to help play their part because people feel strongly that our country has been good to us. And when our country needs us, they're prepared to do the heavy lifting to help us at this point in time. So all in all, between that and we were able to meet with other high-level Barbadians and first-generation Barbadians who are prepared to also help us do the heavy lifting as a nation and with our relationships. In addition to meeting with Madame Lagarde, we met with the U.S. Executive Director, we met with the Executive Director from the UK, and of course the Canadian ones are our representatives on the IMF. And all in all, there is an atmosphere of willingness to cooperate with Barbados because people recognize that this was a country that had a minus rating investment grade 10 years ago. And the simple question was how. And they know that this is not who Barbados has been for decades. So that there has to be some reason why we got here. And if it is capable of resolving, that they're going to help us resolve it in whatever way they can. So long, of course, as we are helping ourselves, because God helps those who help themselves. Yes.
Just give your name, please. Evelyn Emerson, Nation newspaper. There have been concerns about the pegging of the Barbados dollar to the US dollar and possible devaluation. Can you allay fears that there will not be a devaluation?
Well, remember I said at the outset that all that we are doing is to save our quality of life and to save the value of our dollar. And with every succeeding day, I'm confident that we will get there. And that's why I said, relax, we got this one. Relax. The actions that we took on Monday, the others would tell you, and the Director of Finance maybe should speak. I don't believe in being boastful. But trust me, what we've done thus far has impressed people that we are a serious government, that we know what we are about, that we're not putting our people on the front line of adjustment, but we're asking our people to lift weight. But equally, we are serious about bringing Barbados government and Barbados, the way in which Barbados does business into the 21st century. And that in so doing, that will bring about a level of competitiveness, which is a platform for growth, and that there are two ways to attack debt. You restructure to get rid of debt absolute numbers here, and you also grow, which deals with the GDP, so that if the denominator gets bigger, of course, the ratios get smaller. Okay? So I am reasonably confident that if we stay disciplined, if we focus on what we need to focus on, that we can get out of this. There is nothing to be gained by a devaluation of the Barbados dollar. We don't have any goods that are exported that will become cheaper. We don't have any. And in terms of our tourism is not price competitive in that way. Our tourism is competitive on the basis of quality. So we're not going to compete with Mexico and DR on price, but we're going to compete on quality, so that when we have sewage that's running on the south coast, that hurts our tourism. We have 4 international advisories. When we have an outbreak in crime, that hurts our tourism. When we have a public health outbreak, chikungunya or Zika, that hurts our tourism. So that the only thing we get from a devaluation, and this has been our message, is a hard lash for bad behavior. And we've had a lot of fiscal bad behavior for the last decade. The government went on a spending spree, and we don't see the results of where it went. We left debt at $6 billion. Debt today is $15 or so billion. where has the $9 billion gone? We can probably build a sewage plant, as I said, on the South Coast for 1% of that $9 billion. Where has the money gone? And that's what people want to know, because we have nothing to show for it. And once we keep paying interest, well, we then know where it is going, because we're just paying to keep our heads above water, which is why we say it is unsustainable. And anybody who is not motivated by partisan politics and who's an economist will tell you that they know that the actions which the government of Barbados have taken are the correct actions. We had to do it. We had to do it early. And we have to send the signal, look, the burden has to be shared fairly. I mean, and let us think back. We came out of a parliament where one of the same persons who spoke this week from George Street was the biggest proponent of debt restructuring. It is true that he only wanted it through the United Arab Emirates for whatever reason. We've chosen to do it the traditional way. Secondly, the former Prime Minister also was a big proponent in every budget speech for the last 3-4 years that he made, that Barbados, I remember the first one he made clearly, that we cannot continue to take 68 cents of every dollar of revenue and spend on debt. So that all the Barbados Labour Party government has done is to act with dispatch and to put the country's interests on the front line. The fact that we've had 2 engagements in less than 2 weeks with the managing director of the IMF is very, very gratifying to me. We're not unequally yoked. We are being treated with respect and they've acted with dispatch, and we are very grateful for that. I am going to tell you that on Wednesday we will host the president of the Inter-American Development Bank, President Moreno, who is coming in, and who, when he called last week, said, look, we want to come and stand shoulder to shoulder with Barbados, because we recognize that Barbados is doing a difficult thing, but is doing the right thing and acting in this manner. And they know, as we do, that once we settle this arrangement, it unlocks hundreds of millions of development capital for us to fix our broken infrastructure and for us to create a platform for greater competitiveness. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
Katrina came Barbados today. Following the discussions that we have had with the International Monetary Fund, is there a need for job cuts in the corporate sector?
We don't know. I mean, I said on Monday that we're going to phase 2 and phase 3. For me to tell you that up front would be to tell you a lie. What we're going to have is a discussion across the country as to what the options are. There has to be expenditure reform. There has to be greater efficiency in how we spend money. And part of it is also dealing with the reality of what we've inherited. There have been a number of contracts that now have exploded what the government of Barbados must spend. Let us deal with getting rid of those contracts first and see where we're left at with terms of our transfers and subsidies. And then let us see how we can better rationalize the delivery of services in some instances. There may end up being a need for some, but even if there's a need for any form of job cut whatsoever, we have said that we will seek to work with those persons in good faith. We will look at sunset legislation for procurement that allows those persons to be able to benefit from a percentage of government procurement, or those who may prefer to farm, we will give them access. Government is the biggest landowner in the country, or in terms of vending. But what we're not prepared to do, as the last government did, or was done in 1991, is to say job cuts first, because we feel that there are other efficiencies, such as debt restructuring, such as cost recovery, as we did with the Sanitation Services Authority, privatization of function, as we've done with the Barbados Tourism Marketing Inc. and the Barbados Tourism Product Authority, that we can put in place, or the health contribution that we're doing through insurable earnings, 1% of insurable earnings of employees to go for 25% of the hospital budget. There are options. But this notion that your first thing is to come through with a cut, less and cut, no. To the extent that there are any at all, it is going to be as a result of a rationalization, but only with the greatest delay, because we feel that there are other efficiencies that can be had first. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
Also, what has been the response from the IMF with regards to measures announced in the budget?
Well, I think that is what has given them the confidence to send a team extremely quickly, because they realized, as I said, that when they read the budget, that we are a serious government, that we are serious about what has to be done. Everybody was basically saying, when is Barbados going to take action to contain its circumstances? They've been saying so for 4 years. So that the fact that we have so quickly responded to take account of our condition and to stop the bleeding gives those who want to help us confidence that their efforts will not be in vain. And hence the quick deployment of both teams. The initial team after the conversation and after this face-to-face. The initial team was just a fact-finding team. This team that comes now from the 2nd to the 12th of July will actually be a negotiating team with the Barbados government to be able to settle on what would be the terms and conditions of the contract that underpins how much money they'll supply to us and what conditions there will, if any, be to that money. There's nowhere else we can go and borrow money at 1% today, trust me.
Perhaps I think you should make the point that usually it takes a year to negotiate such an arrangement with the IMF. And the fact that we are getting it done in relatively short time, about 3 months, speaks to the fact that they have changed their attitude and their perception and view of Barbados' seriousness in terms of addressing what are critical national issues. And I think that point needs to be made. Because prior, that credibility issue did not exist. We have been able to re-establish that credibility by the actions that we have taken rather than speaking about it. So I think that point needs to be made.
I think people also recognize that there has been a level of creativity in spreading the burden in the way in which we spread it. And as I said, in these matters I prefer time to be my ally rather than self-praise. So let time be our ally. What matters at the end of the day is how Barbadians can get through this process. There will be dislocation. We're dieting. I dieting now. I wish I wasn't, because I know what I would eat today. But the bottom line is that we do things to get to a certain destination, to get better, and then once we get there, we can take control of our lives. Yeah. Any other questions? That's it. AG, anything? All right, thank you very much, and I'll see you all soon again.